first one was big, maybe not insurmountably big. With help from the Federal Insurance Company, which is a subsidiary of Chubb Insurance, former President Donald Trump managed to post a $91.6 million bond in the defamation case he lost to E. Jean Carroll. That bond allows Trump to avoid paying E. Jean Carroll for real while he attempts to appeal that judgment against him. If he were to lose the appeal and not pay up, the Federal Insurance Company and Chubb would be on the hook to pay Ms. Carroll. That has given the company's investors and brokers and some of their customers apparently a little bit of heartburn, judging from a letter the CEO of Chubb sent around defending the decision, saying, quote, "As the surety, we don't take sides. We are supporting and are part of the justice system plumbing included in this case." In other words, we're just that trap thing at the bottom of the sink. We are not the stuff that got stuck in it. Don't get mad at us for just doing our jobs. But if a $91.6 million bond was a doable one for the former president, a $454 million bond and counting is proving to be another matter entirely. Lawyers for Mr. Trump today told a New York appellate court that he can't find a company to help him with a nearly $500 million bond while he appeals the New York civil fraud case involving his business. According to the filing, more than 24 companies, including Chubb, have decided on that bond they cannot do it and they will not do it. That leaves Trump in a very vulnerable position for somebody who brags about his personal wealth as much as he does, who's key to his political appeal is that he can't be bought because he has so much money than everybody else. In this case, what he has more than anybody else is a need for money, quickly and desperately. New York Attorney General Tish James has said that she is ready and willing to start seizing Trump's properties in order to satisfy the judgment. The clock is ticking. The former president may have to put up more than the $500 million bond that's giving him trouble already. As the New York Times puts it today, quote, Trump might have to post an appeal bond worth more, possibly above $500 million to reflect the interest he'll owe in order to prevent Ms. James from seizing his assets on March 25th. And I mean March 25th this year, as in 1 week from tonight. Joining us now is Suzanne Craig, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter for the New York Times. Sue, it's really good to have you here in person. Thank you.
Good to see you.
You too. We have seen Mr. Trump put up one bond already, and now we are seeing him saying he can't put up the second one. Did we learn anything from the circumstances around which he put up that first bond that tell us if he's getting help, that tell us how many of his assets have been tapped already, that tell us whether or not he really might be having trouble with the second one?
Well, what really came into focus for me today when I was reading this was that there's been a lot of speculation. He's going to put up a building. You know, what are they going to accept for this appeal bond? I think we're all learning a lot about appeal bonds as we go. And what we really saw today was that they want hard cash. They are not accepting assets. And Alan Garten, who's a senior officer, is a lawyer at the Trump Organization, he said that they tried, and with Chubb in particular, none of them wanted real estate. These aren't real estate companies. They want things they can liquidate immediately. They want cash. And they talked to Chubb about doing this larger one that he's facing a week from today. And Chubb last week backed away, and they're not going to take real estate. So now we know for certain that he needs to come up with cash, and he does not have enough cash, according to the filings today.
So can he, I mean, what are his options? Can he sell things that he currently owns, liquidate assets, liquidate real estate assets or other assets in order to convert them into cash, since that's the only thing he can pay with here?
That's it, and it's going to have to be like today.
Yeah.
Like soon. He's going to have to figure, and he may have, we don't know, he may be already in the process of potentially negotiating a sale. He may have gotten a deal with somebody that he knows. And we don't know if that's in progress or not. These are just sort of things that I'm speculating on. Mm-hmm. It's important to say that, but that could be going on. But what we do know is that the filing today was sort of they're raising their hand saying they don't have the cash to meet this. So they want it stayed. And I think the other thing that's really important here is this is a legal maneuver, because they're asking a judge to set this aside. And if it's rejected, they may go to the appellate court. So they may buy themselves some time. And the Attorney General also has the option of saying you can have another 30 days. If they were to come and say, we have a plan, mm-hmm. There's a lot of things. We just never have seen anything like this. So there's a lot of things that could happen. But right now, he is looking down the barrel of a gun. I mean, you can hear the clock. He has got 1 week, and if nothing changes, the Attorney General of New York can come in and start to seize
his accounts, seize his buildings, seize his material. So the thing that I am worried about now that I didn't think I would be worried about when this whole process started is that I'm worried that he is in such a crunch, and I'm worried what that means in terms of a national security threat for the United States. Is there anything about the process of putting up bonds that prevents some angel from coming in and paying it for him? And if that happened, would we know?
Well, that can happen, and if that happens, there's going to be tax consequences for the person who gives it, because there's going to be
it's a gift.
It's a taxable event.
Okay.
So, but you know, and I've sort of been wondering how much transparency are we going to have in it. We do know with the E. Jean Carroll case, the bond was posted, and he posted his collateral. It's in filings, a brokerage account that he has that has liquid securities in it.
Okay.
So there's some visibility. And keep in mind, there's also a monitor over the company that is going to be watching this. So I suspect at the end we're going to know. I never want to say never with anything, but right now I feel like we should know at least who comes forward with it. But that's another possibility, is someone could come up with the money and write a check to cover it. He also has other wealthy family members. Ivanka Trump and her husband come to mind. Mm-hmm. So there's still, I think, a range of possibilities, I think, and they're exploring them all, I can guarantee it. They have to be. So I think that next week, I think we're just going to have a lot more visibility into exactly how this is going to be dealt with. But we could be faced in a week with a situation where the Attorney General says, the day has come, and I'm going to appeal to the court, and we're going to move forward to seize the assets.
He recently changed his position on the culture war issue around Bud Light after Anheuser-Busch did a fundraiser for him. He then changed his position on TikTok and the Chinese government after he met with a guy who has a big financial stake in TikTok. He now needs $500 million right now. He has to pay it on Monday. And so I'm just worried about what's for sale. I hope you're right. There will be some transparency about it. Suzanne, thank you so much.